r/AskReddit. What terrifying confession has someone told you while drunk? A coworker was pretty inebriated when he told me that he hates his life. He hates his partner, and the only reason he's still married to her is because he loves his daughter and doesn't want to lose her. Hate to say this, but that's a huge drawback as a dad. Dads certainly don't get custody as much or treated as well in the court system. Getting a divorce could really mean you don't get to see your kids. A lot of guys stay in bad relationships because the thought of not seeing their kids every day is too much to handle. I worked in a hospital and an alcoholic guy I knew from around my town came in. Of course he was very drunk, so he got a bed. He was homeless at this point. Just as he was starting to settle he screamed I slit his fucking throat. So I went up to him and asked him to settle. And he started telling me that he did it while in the army and could never forgive himself for it. Cried himself to sleep and died in the local park a few months later. Just goes to show how little our country supports veterans who gave up their mental health to defend it. One of my best friends since middle school opened up to me the day we had our last day of high school. We had been partying all day, got off at 10 AM, but most people left at around 3 PM to go get ready for the seniors dinner and after party and whatnot. My friend stayed behind with our class president. I told him I'd pick him up for the dinner and left. When I got back, both were falling down drunk and in tears. A few years earlier, our class president had lost his father. I take my buddy back to his house so he can get changed for the dinner, and on the way he tells me what happened. They had kept drinking when everyone left and eventually got to the topic of their dads. I had never met my friend's dad. He died and that was all I knew. I never knew how he died. It turns out my buddy's dad was a lawyer or something in the country he's from and was being extorted by a gang. When money started to run out, my buddy's dad sent the family to another country and told them he'd meet them there, that he had to finish some things up. A few weeks after moving they learned that he had been murdered by the gang. It completely ducked my friend up. We always used to drink heavily and whatever since we were in high school. For me it was just drinking. For my buddy it was numbing the pain. It was ducking shocking when he told me this and really made me understand him a lot more, why he acted how he acted. My sister's boyfriend at the time told me he thought he might have fallen for the wrong sister. Doesn't compare to most of these, but my sister is my best friend and I was so scared he might ruin that. Sounds like that chat was already ruined lol. Neither of us ever mentioned it to her, but yeah, they broke up not long after for other trust issues. Namely, he was stealing from her. Not a great dude. Edit, my sister and I are fine, closer than ever. If my ex was still in love with me, I wouldn't be married to you. Oh my god. I still think about it. I don't think I'll ever forget it. It keeps me up at night sometimes. Are you still married with them? Yes. A friend of mine died from a drug overdose. After the funeral a mutual friend of ours and I were getting drunk when he broke down crying. He asked me if I remembered the time when he and our dead friend told me about an accident that they'd witnessed where they saw a truck driver die. I told him I did. He then told me the most ducked up shit. He said that our friend ran up to the dying man and stole his wedding ring and that the man couldn't do anything but look up, terrified, at our friend as he was being robbed. I knew they were bad into drugs, but I never thought they could do anything like that. I grew up with them. They were like my brothers. I don't really trust anyone completely anymore. No drugs or alcohol involved, but I have somewhat of a similar story. A few years ago, my mom witnessed an accident. A lady was texting, blew through a red light, and T-boned a truck with an elderly man driving. My mom jumped out of her car and held on to him while waiting for an ambulance. The girl who hit him, early 20s, was freaking out and called her mom. The mom showed up first and kept telling my mom, just tell the cops he ran the red light, no one will know. And he died. My mom heard his last words, sounds, really, that she repeated for weeks. My mom cried for days. She met the family and it was the man and his wife's anniversary or something like that. We obviously told the cops the truth, but we don't know any of the follow up. His obituary is framed on our wall. I hate to think the last thing he heard was just tell the cops this was his fault. Once at a college party, this big guy got upset. picked up the table and threw it across the room, shouting my uncle molested me. Everyone was terrified, but we all felt really bad for the guy. Damn. Fingers crossed somebody there helped him into therapy. That statement will stop a party dead in its tracks, and honestly for his sake it's good that it did. Yeah, it was heartbreaking when he started to break down and cry after realizing what had just happened. Needless to say, the party was over. When I was 14, my mom took me and my sisters and a couple of our friends to the beach. My sister, 15, and I got our own room with our 2 friends and wound up meeting some boys and getting drunk. My sister's friend, 15 female, was really drunk and got super upset and confessed that her stepfather had been sexually molesting her, raping her, for years. Really horrible stuff. It sobered everyone up fast. We rallied around her, told her we were there for her, yada yada, but when we got home from the beach trip a few days later I knew I needed to tell my mom. After I told my mom, she got the state police involved. There was a trial, and the man wound up sentenced to 8 years in prison. It turned out he was doing it to the younger sister as well. My ex told me that he had been molested by his sister between the ages of 6 to 11. She was 9 to 14. His dad walked in once and didn't do anything. His own family knew that he was being sexually abused for years and did absolutely nothing to protect him. I'm afraid it's likely that the sister was being molested by the father. She was the mom's daughter from another marriage and her first husband had molested her. My ex's dad was a second husband and no, he didn't touch her. He just didn't care that she touched his son. What is he and the sister's relationship like now? Did it badly affect him mentally? She lives in another state, so they don't see her much. He's chosen to forgive her, but it was always hard for me. I mean, she was old enough to know that it was wrong. I think forgiveness was just the easier path for him, which is noble. He's more angry at his parents and their relationship is extremely codependent and strained, simultaneously. And yeah, it definitely has had an effect on him. He's an addict and has extreme self-esteem issues. It's also manifested in his sexual desires and habits. He used to like sex more when I resisted. If I said no, it really turned him on. I heard my mom tell her friend I was a mistake and the reason her and my dad divorced. That's why you don't eavesdrop. After my mom died I was going through her email. We never had a good relationship, pretty much ever. Anyways, I went in her Gmail and just did a search for my name. Found a part where she told my aunt how much she didn't like me and wishes I would just go away. It wasn't the least bit surprising, and I've said the same thing about her, but it still stung a bit. The thing we always fought about was her drinking. She was a chronic abusive alcoholic. As just a stranger, this made me hurt for you. I hope you have moved on and are not only okay but thriving. I had a male friend tell me he had raped me once when I was passed out drunk. I'm a straight male and had been friends with this guy for 15 years and had been drunk with him a lot. Since then I have found out a lot of messed up stuff about him. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Growing up gay in a small town, I was the only gay person I knew for most of my life up until adulthood. I get sick with guilt when I read stories like yours because of how inappropriate and pushy I was with a straight friend when I was a teenager, but I never would have assaulted him like that or touched him period without his consent. It's just that he was kind of all I had. It's hard to accept no gracefully when you're young and lonely. Maybe I'm just rationalizing what a peen I was. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm making what happened to you about me somehow. I hope you're okay. Life is just so goddamn ducked up sometimes. At a family gathering my grandma got tipsy and started to tell stories from her childhood. While she does this every time, no matter tipsy or sober, guess it's just a normal grandma thing. This time it took a dark turn. She told us a story that is the reason she hates to go to the dentist and particularly hates the drilling part. She told us a story about when she was 6 years old. During World War II, my family lived in Hamburg, Germany, right next to the harbor. During a particular week in 1943, the city was continuously bombed, and over 35,000 people died, and more than 100,000 people were injured. The houses that were hit mostly burned down, creating a huge fire. with such force that I sucked not only oxygen in, creating strong winds, but also people. The fire created such heat that people running out of their burning houses got stuck in the molten asphalt on the streets and burned to death. As it was all happening around her, that particular smell was present for over a week in her part of the city. Drilling in your tooth creates exactly that smell. My grandma had to stop the dentist as she recognized the smell immediately. This story shook us to the core as it came out of the blue. It still sends chills down my spine. For anybody who wants to read more about it, Operation Gomorrah. My mother once told me a story while drunk. She had a pregnancy before me, but her boyfriend wasn't ready for a kid. So he kicked her in the stomach until she was no longer pregnant. So for revenge she had her friend who was a prostitute seduce him, take him to a hotel room, and tied him up. My mom then described how she took a baseball bat and broke every bone she could of his. Described how she had to throw water on him to keep him awake. She was never tried for it, so I'm assuming he lived. I had heard the kicked in the stomach till miscarriage part before. The whole bat thing was a new detail. She hasn't mentioned it since. I had a boyfriend who never talked about his past ever. He talked so fondly of his old state, but just about the actual state, never about people. If you treat a prod further he would just say, oh well, it doesn't matter anymore. We were young. I was about 19 and he was probably like 23 or so. He drank a shat ton all the time and whatever, we were young, so I just thought that it was normal and all in good fun. One night while shat faced, he started talking about how much he loved going into the woods and how he and his friends enjoyed playing on the rivers and streams in his old state. Then he got very sad and started to babble a bit incoherently. I heard him say something along the lines of his friend came to his house on meth and they were all also on drugs. Then more incoherently babble, then something about his friend getting shot in the face. Then more incoherent babbling, then something about that is why he can never go home again. He was so desperately sad and missed his home very much. You could tell every time the topic came up. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he accidentally, or on purpose, killed a guy and was on the run. I have pinned my money on accident because he seemed so distraught, but you never know. Also, you barely know anyone or anything at 19 years old. I often wonder if he ever had to face those demons. My mother's first husband, the sperm donor. I was 16. She had just walked out that same day, and he got extremely drunk and told me that I was never supposed to have been born and that I should have died with my brother. I asked him what he meant by my brother, since I had no siblings, and he confessed to beating the shit out of my mother when she was pregnant and she ended up in the hospital. I was born, but my twin brother died in the womb. At the time my mother's English, she's Polish, was not good, so he claimed to doctors that she just fell down the stairs and threatened to have her deported and used me as blackmail if she ever told anyone. I followed her soon after. Once she had contacted me that she'd found a place to stay, I asked her if she had anything to tell me regarding my birth, and she told me the same story. I guess that explains why I felt like I was missing a part of myself all my life.